Well, hey there, sober ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm so excited to be able to share time with you and my friend Bridget, as she's going to explain to us an incredible amount of content that's really new to our community. And I'm excited about it because it's a little bit of a twist on recovery work, and she has a lot to offer. So eyes and ears focus on Bridget. I'm going to turn it over to her and let her introduce herself more formally and tell us a little bit more about her story and all of the things she's going to teach us today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bridget.
All right. Hello. Thanks again, Shelby, for having me on. And I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to share some of my information and wisdom, I guess, with your Shelby John and your coaching that you're doing, which is such a wonderful thing and definitely very much needed in our world, right? We need all the people that are there to share their experience and help each other to grow and heal from the pain that can be caused by addiction. So to introduce myself and tell you my story and, what kind of brings me to the position that I'm in today to be able to share about some information that I'm hoping will help others. To start, I guess I'll share a little bit about my family background. I feel like that's an important place to start given the topic that I will be talking about today. So to start, my family, we're a bit of a blended family, and I frequently like to refer to us as a modern day Brady Bunch. So what I mean by that is, my dad was married previously before he met my mom. He and his ex-wife had adopted my sister, and they ended up getting divorced. And my mom, she ended up having my brother with a boyfriend of hers from college, and they didn't end up staying together. And my parents actually met by taking my brother and my sister to the same daycare. So they met, they quickly became a couple, fell in love, got married. And then after they got married, then they had me, and then they had my younger brother, which we are about 16 months apart. We're pretty close in age. So we're a bit of a blended family. And what also was going on in my family is that my mom had struggled with alcohol. She is currently a recovering alcoholic. She stopped drinking back in 2006, shortly before I turned 16. So growing up, I was somewhat of a middle child in a blended family, but there was also about 5.5 years between me and my older brother. So there's my sister who's 10 years older, my brother who's 5.5 years older, then there's me, and then my brother who, like I said, we're very close in age. He's a little bit younger. So I felt like I really fell into that middle child, kind of lost child role, and struggled a lot with loneliness as I was growing up. So to begin my drinking story, which is kind of interesting, starts shortly after my mom became sober. I definitely had tried some sips of beer here and there from my parents. Obviously, growing up in a house where drinking is very common, I feel that's not unusual for children to experience. And so apart from that, though, the first time that I really drank alcohol would be shortly after I had turned 16. I remembered being very fearful of getting a DUI. I was worried that I would drink and drive and, all sorts of things would happen, which, my mom did have a couple of DUIs. So I don't know if that's necessarily where the fear came from, because I feel like I didn't really notice what was going on much of the time with my mom's drinking. So I was very fearful of that. And my brother and our neighbor and I, we had this great plan that I would just drink excessively. And then they would ask me if I wanted to drive, and would see if I would say yes or no, which, looking back is definitely not a great idea. So what we did was my neighbor ended up getting a bottle of rum from his parents' house, and I ended up having 9 shots that night, which as a really small 16-year-old was definitely not a great idea. I got horribly sick, and, after we were done drinking and we'd all gone back to our rooms and, went to bed, I started throwing up. And I remember my dad walked in and he just kind of opened my door and he's like, "What's going on in here? Are you on drugs?" And I just told him, "No, I think I just ate something at McDonald's. It's not agreeing with my stomach." And, definitely thought that I was very sly and got away with that. And that was really the first time that I started drinking, which I think speaks to being a child of an alcoholic in a way that I just kind of started very intensely like that. That did deter me for a while though, and I didn't end up drinking again really until I was about 19 or 20 when I went away to college. And that night, my brother did ask if I wanted to drive, and I said no, but I don't know that if he had pressured me, if I would have actually gotten behind the wheel of a car. Definitely don't recommend that to anybody. So my drinking continued when I got into college. And, there's a few pretty big events that went on. It started kind of slow. I didn't start off with a bang like I did at 16. I really eased myself in. I was living away at school in a dorm. I did community college for the first 2 years. I played softball, and then I transferred to a 4-year school where I continued to play softball. So the drinking really happened more when I was at that 4-year school, when I was about a junior. And, my friends were right around 21. So drinking was very common. It's very common drinking age for a lot of people. I started to get back into drinking, started off slowly, but I did have my priorities with school and softball that I never really would let the drinking interfere with that. Also, right around the time right before I turned 21, I went through a pretty bad breakup. I did get engaged to my high school boyfriend, and that ended very, very badly. So, it kind of led to some spiraling in my drinking, which of course the timing of it was we broke up about 2 months before I turned 21. And so then for me, drinking became an emotional escape. It was something that was also fun that I was doing with my friends and provided me escape from that pain of that painful breakup. So, fast forward 2 months, I'm my 21st birthday. My mom actually got us a limo to take me and a few of my friends down to the city where, we met up with my older brother who was living at the city, and I got blackout drunk that night, and I, was quite a mess. Luckily, my friends were able to help get me back home because, we had the limo, so none of us had to worry about, driving. And, I obviously believe I was the one that got the most drunk that night. And, luckily I was able to get home okay. And so that kind of then continued, with my drinking. Now I'm of legal age. It's very easy to access it, very easy to go places. All my friends are 21. We're all hanging out at bars, when I'm not playing softball, when I'm not in school. A lot of my time then became consumed with drinking. And we continued to drink like that, throughout my senior year. And another big event, which, I believe was probably a bottom point for my drinking, which wasn't the time that I stopped, would be the night before my graduation from college. I, again, got completely drunk. I did not get to the point where I blacked out like I did on my 21st birthday, but I did drink quite a bit. And I remember my roommates had gotten me home that night. And that night really could have been very tragic because it was similar to that first night where I got sick when I was sleeping, but this time I didn't wake up. So I did, get sick and didn't realize it until the morning that, I had thrown up all over my bed, and I'm trying to get ready for graduation. My parents are coming really early to take me to this ceremony because I had received honors, and I'm not really consistent and congruent with, these beliefs that they're sharing about somebody with honors as I'm sitting on stage dry heaving because I'm, still drunk probably from the night before. And that the irony is not lost on me on that, and how that story could have ended a lot differently. My life could have ended that day. So, I think that that's something that still kind of sticks with me as to, man, my drinking really did kind of escalate, and I had the potential for it to continue to get a lot worse. Shortly after I graduated, though, I did start working at a rehab center. I had studied psychology. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, and counseling was always something that I had wanted to do. I had an amazing teacher throughout my college experience where she taught a counseling class, and that just completely inspired me. I knew that that was what I wanted to do. I wasn't quite sure how to do it. I had talked myself out of applying for graduate school at the time that I had graduated from my undergraduate because I just didn't believe that I was good enough. I didn't think that I would get in. I had, some pretty low self-esteem and, just didn't believe in myself, and almost, in fact, talked myself out of the even applying for the job at the rehab center that I did end up working at. So luckily I didn't talk myself out of that job. I did, apply. I had a couple of interviews and I ended up getting the job where I was working with adolescent girls that were going to rehab. So that was pretty interesting, through this was at the town that I went to school in that I was able to find this job. So I got an apartment. I had stayed in this town, which, was about an hour away from where I grew up. And through my drinking with some of my friends from school, I did start to meet some, local people that lived and grew up in this area and, started to, I was continuing to drink. I was going to bars. I got really connected to this karaoke bar that, the night to be there was Thursday night. So now I'm not just drinking on Friday and Saturday, I'm drinking on Thursdays. Then one of my friends gets a job as a bartender there and she's saying, hey, come visit me on Monday or Tuesday when I'm working. So now I'm going drinking 4 or 5 times throughout the week. I wasn't drinking excessive in the amount, but I was drinking pretty frequently. And, I was also working at a rehab facility now. So things were really kind of in my head. I'm thinking, what's going on? I'm trying to educate people on how to stay sober. At this point, I was pretty aware of my mom's journey and we had talked about it. She had helped me get the job at this rehab center by talking to me about the 12 steps. So I had some knowledge at my interview about 12 steps. She thought that would be very helpful for me. So I go, I'm working and I am drinking and things are just, like I said, there's this disconnect that's going on. I'm feeling a little bit guilty. I would never go to work hungover hungover, yes, but I would never go to work under the influence. I never crossed that boundary or that barrier. So that never happened, but I was definitely really thinking about what I was doing and starting to connect the things that, I was learning as I'm teaching these girls, these things that are kind of applying to me too. I'm reading things. I see this paper about adult children of alcoholics and I'm thinking, wow, a lot of that stuff really connects with me. This is something that I really need to think about and explore more. And, things were coming together, and my drinking was kind of starting to slow down because, my hours had changed. It was really easy to go out 4 or 5 nights throughout the week. When I first started working there, I was working second shift. So I was working from 3:30 to 11:30 and I'm a 22-year-old who's not tired after that shift, and I'm going out with my friends, which then allowed me time to then recover so I could be ready for work at 3:30 the next day in the afternoon. Then I started, to get some different shifts at work where, maybe 1 or 2 days I would work in the morning. And that actually ended up being kind of helpful, I guess, because shortly I'd worked there when I was 22. And then shortly after I turned 23, I'm working a little bit different hours. And, on a Saturday night, my friend is in town and we're hanging out and we're like, hey, let's go to the bar. And I was like, yeah, I'll go with, but I have to work at 7:30 in the morning. So I'm not going to drink, but I can stay up. I'm 23, so I can stay up late and hang out and not drink. And that actually ended up being the night that my friend and we both met our husbands that night. And one of the reasons that my husband was even remotely interested in me was the fact that I wasn't drinking. So, which, was kind of a miracle, I guess, in a way that wasn't my norm. So for that to happen and that to be the night that we met and that to be something that kind of drew him towards me, apart from, the good looks and the charm, I'm hoping that was also something that drew him to me. But, he noticed that I wasn't drinking and he wanted to get to know me a little bit more. So, we started dating, and after a few months of dating, I think he started to realize, okay, she's not quite the non-drinker that I thought she was when I met her. And, he noticed that I was drinking, and that was something that, he was, not really wanting, I guess we had this conversation where we had talked about our futures, right? That you have in those early relationships, well, what do you want out of this? Right. And does this have potential to go anywhere? And he had made it very clear to me that it was very important for him that he enter into a relationship with somebody that doesn't drink, because he wants to get married and have kids, and he doesn't want alcohol to be a part of that picture in any way. And he's actually never drank any single drop of alcohol ever in his life, which, to me, I thought like, wow, that's such an accomplishment. I don't know if a lot of people do that, because growing up, that was not a norm for me. Everybody I knew, my parents, my aunts, everyone in my family, they all drank. There was nobody that didn't, and it didn't make sense, for somebody to not drink. It was very confusing. But I also was very much intrigued by that. And I thought, I'm working at this rehab center. I'm realizing that my drinking has had some moments where it was really dangerous. And, I'm checking off some of the boxes of an alcohol use disorder. I have the genetics working against me. And here I meet this person who's never drank and who made it very clear that not drinking was something very important for a future. And, I thought, wow, I'm totally on board with that. That's amazing. And I don't know that I would meet very many people who would feel that way. So, that's where it really all kind of clicked and connected for me. It helped me be more congruent with the things that I was learning from, what I'm teaching the adolescents that I'm working with. I'm seeing also the paths that they're on. I'm seeing the impact from their families that it's had on them. And I'm recognizing that I'm in the same boat. I come from a family where alcohol was a problem. And I have looked at my past, and my alcohol was very problematic. And it's already taken so much from me. It took my childhood from me, and, it almost took my life from me, and it just wasn't giving me or offering me anything. And going back to that, growing up middle child, lost child, I struggled a lot with loneliness and always wanted a family, always wanted to get married. I was obsessed with the whole fairy tale idea, wanted to get married, wanted to have kids. And so I have somebody who is on board with that and wants to make sure that, we're raising our kids in a healthy environment. So that was, November of 2013 that I was committed, and I said, absolutely, I'm on board with that. And, I had my last drink. I don't remember the exact day, but I haven't drank again since then. And I've, never regretted it and never looked back. So that's, that's my story, which, that's, I feel very grateful that that can be my story instead of, like I said, the possible tragic story that could have happened.
That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's really a dynamic story, which I like, because there are a lot of twists and turns to that. My favorite part, I think, is that you were working in a treatment center when you realized that your drinking became problematic. I just love that.
Right.
All right. So take it away on what you're going to teach us today.
Okay. Well, and I also just wanted to talk about too, the relationship with my mom, and how we came to develop our, today's sober woman. We wanted to work together and come together as a dynamic duo. I guess we wanted to bring something that was positive and encouraging and supportive to people who struggle with addiction. And we decided, we had talked about this idea for a while. We had thrown around some names and came to Today's Sober Woman was something that we both felt very connected to. And we wanted to be just like this light that can, be present in the darkness that addiction likes to cast over us. So we started that a little over a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic, when we realized that this was it was about to be a very dark and isolating time for people who are struggling with addiction. And, in my work, I don't work at a rehab center anymore. I work more in the outpatient setting now, but I continue to be a counselor, therapist. And that's, something that's always been my passion, I think always will be. And, I'm realizing as we are, talking with some of our clients that there's so many times that alcohol especially is just kind of pushed out there on us, and it's advertised all the time. And I had a particular client who, was mentioning, just scrolling through their Facebook, how they constantly see ads for alcohol. And, I'm trying to think, I'm encouraging them. There's ways that you can, hide those ads. You can let Facebook know you don't want to see that. But then I'm also thinking we need more positive messages to be out there, to come across your Facebook page or your social media, so that you can, have that to counteract, the constant images of alcohol, and now with marijuana legalization in some states, just popping out at you. So, we developed Today's Sober Women. We started a Facebook page where, we try to post, as much as possible, just encouraging messages, just continue helping people to continue on their path of sobriety. And, we're hoping to expand that in many ways. We're working on some different things right now to expand that. So, I think being, my mom being a recovering alcoholic and me being an adult child of an alcoholic who is also sober, and, we have a lot to offer, I think, and we really want to be that, so like that light, that support and encouragement in the world to those who, are struggling, and maybe those who aren't struggling, but could just use some positive encouragement in their lives, to continue on their growth. So that's Today's Sober Women. And Shelby, I can go into the breaking the cycle, right? That's what
Absolutely. I love Today's Sober Woman. It's a wonderful page. If you guys want to check them out on Facebook, make sure you like and follow their page. They do post a lot of really great content. And I believe you're in my group now, right? You're in the Confident Sober Women group. So
I believe so. I'll make sure that I am if I'm not.
Yeah, that way we can communicate, or as we share things, particularly this training, people will be able to reach out to you with more questions. So yeah, take it away. Can't wait.
All right. So breaking the cycle. So I've come up with 5 steps that I think were helpful for me and can be helpful for, anyone else who may be an adult child of an alcoholic. So, and not just alcohol, right? But alcohol or drugs or any kind of addiction, and, even mental health. If you have parents that have struggled with mental health, that could have created some barriers for you as you were growing up. So the first step that I find, we all need this, and this is, probably a constant step to always be working on, is increasing awareness. You have to recognize the pain and the destruction that addiction is causing or has caused in your life, right? Addiction, it's going to live with that denial. It's going to continue to be a struggle, and we have to shine the light on it. We have to be aware of what it's done and take its power away that way, right? If we don't have that awareness, then there's not much we can do. So, if you're listening to this, if you are, questioning some things, don't be afraid of what you might uncover. It very well could be painful, and it can also help you to propel yourself forward so that you aren't staying stuck, because addiction wants you to stay stuck. It wants you to live in this darkness. It doesn't want you to be aware of the pain that it's doing, because then you're going to be able to take that pain away, right? You're going to be able to separate yourself from that and heal from that pain. So when you have increased that awareness, step 2 would be to then educate yourself. Now that you're aware, you need to educate and inform yourself. Addiction thrives in that isolation. It wants you to think that you're alone. There is a depth of knowledge about addiction and its impact on the family. And that in and of itself proves that you are not alone. So don't think that you're alone, and don't think that you have to go through this alone. I really think that educating and informing yourself is going to help you to really discover who you are. Because one of the things that we struggle with as an adult child of an alcoholic is that we don't really know what normal is, and that's okay. And you're going to figure that out by doing this step, and you're going to recognize that that's something that maybe you struggle with, and, you can use that knowledge in order to help yourself grow, right? And to recognize what is normal and, move forward. A really good place to start, which is where I started with my journey, which was recommended to me by my therapist, was to read the book Adult Children of Alcoholics. It is a very well-written book, and it provides information that, it might not all apply. I don't necessarily think that all of it applied to me in my situation. And I really just focus on the stuff that did, kind of what they say in meetings, right? Like, focus on the similarities and not the differences. Take what applies to you, and you can leave the rest. And maybe it can be helpful to just know some of that other information too. I am very curious, if my siblings were to read that book, what their take would be on it, because I'm guessing that, my older brother's experience with my mom's drinking is very different than mine. He was older. He knew more of what was going on as it was going on. My mom became sober right before I turned 16. So, my brother might have been the one to take more of the blow and trying to protect me and my younger brother from really recognizing what was happening. So that's why I think maybe not all of it completely applied to me, but I was able to take the things that did and use that to my advantage. The third step that I can't emphasize enough is forgiveness. And this forgiveness, I think, needs to be directed to both yourself and to your family members. When you recognize that you're an adult child of an alcoholic, that your childhood was, taken away from you by addiction, it can be really easy to go down that path of blaming. I could easily blame my mom for struggling with alcohol and causing me to feel alone and, have all the issues that I have and that I'm working on daily to try to, heal and grow from. But when I really think about it, I don't really think it's my mom's fault. The real culprit of all of this is addiction. It was the alcohol, it was the disease that she was struggling with. If I get into blaming my mom, I can then take it back to, well, then, if my mom became an alcoholic, then, what was my grandparents' role in that? And, my great grandparents, and so on and so forth. We can go back all kinds of generations, and who knows where it even began, right? Because my grandma is not an alcoholic. She does have a nicotine addiction, but her parents were alcoholics. Her father for sure was an alcoholic. I'm not 100% sure about her mother, but her mother did die when she was younger. She struggled with lupus, and I had recently heard that it was possible that she was also struggling with some drinking, so she became an adult child of an alcoholic, which then maybe fostered this environment growing up with her that, made the perfect storm for my mom to become an alcoholic. And it can continue and continue, but I don't want to get stuck blaming, because that's not going to get anywhere. If I'm stuck blaming my mom and, like I said, getting stuck in that generational loop of blame, then, alcohol is continuing to kind of get away scot-free, when that was the real culprit for my mom, was alcohol, the disease of addiction. Right. So work on that. And, if you're currently maybe struggling with addiction, forgive yourself for maybe some of the actions and things that you did as a result of an adult child and alcoholic, where maybe you didn't know what was normal. Maybe you got caught up in some unhealthy relationships. Forgive yourself and, move forward and try to heal as much as possible. The more that you know about this role that addiction has played in your life, I think the more relief and freedom you'll experience, because then you have the knowledge to then move forward and do something with it. So the next step 4 I would say would be to invest in yourself. Much like people who are struggling with addiction, we also have people, places, and things that we need to consider. Are they healthy? Are they not healthy? We need to set ourselves up to be successful. I think one of the things that really helped me be successful, and, it might have just been a divine intervention for me, that I happened to meet my husband, which also kind of ironic that I meet my non-drinking husband who's never drank at a bar, so there is some irony there. But having met him and having somebody who is a non-drinker who wants that to be our environment, no one in his family drinks, there's never alcohol in our house. There's never alcohol at, his parents' house. My kids are growing up in an environment where they just, like, alcohol is not around in any way, shape, or form. And I think that that's so helpful for me to continue on my journey of not drinking and, continuing to grow and not allow the impact that alcohol had on me throughout my life, whether I was drinking it or not. I'm not letting that impact me in an unhealthy way. And then step 5, which is the final step that I have for us today, would be discipline. So I want you to live with daily intentions, of being outside of those grips of alcohol. We have to know what our past is. We have to know how it impacts us today, because it does. And we can use that information to, provide ourselves a little bit of relief. It's not going to make things perfect, but I can know that because I'm adult children of an alcoholic, and these were the experiences that I had in my past, that is impacting me today. And I can use that awareness to then make sure that it doesn't cause me harm, right? Or as much harm as maybe it could if I lacked that awareness. And I'm very disciplined in that. I try to consistently reflect. And like the word I used a lot earlier, when I noticed that I wasn't being congruent, I try to reflect to make sure that I have that congruence in my life, that my actions are aligned with my values. My values of raising a happy, healthy family, my values of increasing and improving my self-esteem, my self-worth, my value of being the best counselor that I can be, and helping people to escape from the grips of the addiction or the disease that they're struggling with, or the mental health symptoms that they're struggling with. Those are my actions that I want to live by. And I know that I can do all of those things so much better when I am not drinking, right? When I don't have that alcohol in any way, shape, or form impacting my life. And I think that's the important thing too, to remember, is that addiction, it doesn't just impact the person that is struggling with it, right? If it's alcohol, it's not just the person consuming it, it's everybody around that person that's also being impacted. And, the more that we know about that, the more that we can create, future generations that are going to continue to just be healthier and happier, and hopefully alcohol and drug free as much as possible. Any thoughts or questions, Shelby?
That was great. I think that your steps are really perfect and well said. Thank you so very, very much for sharing that with us. This is obviously an important topic because, as you and I both know, working in this field for long enough, I mean, pretty much everybody that I encounter in my private practice is either in recovery, was raised by someone in recovery, or is married to somebody in recovery, or is parenting somebody in recovery. So this is not something that doesn't pretty much affect everybody in some way. It's just that the spectrum on our trauma response, I guess, is varied, right? Depending on if we were being raised by somebody who was a very active alcoholic, or if you're married to somebody that was a lot of volatility. So I just think that it affects everybody. It's not going to go away. It's an epidemic we have in our country for sure. And I think you mentioned already that we have this obsession with substances. It's not just alcohol; it's marijuana, even some other recreational drugs that are available. That even adults, not just this isn't just a teenage thing. It's a huge problem, and I wonder if we really could just spend some more time thinking and finding ways to fulfill our self, to really self-soothe, really to learn how to self-soothe. And I know that I teach a lot of people different strategies, you probably do too, related to that, as far as like grounding ourselves and utilizing really good breath work or meditation. I do a lot of EFT work or tapping. There's a lot of ways that we can insert different tools into our life in the moment, like literally in the moment. It's going to help destimulate our central nervous system, really get our brains back online, and be able to handle life on life's terms.
I think a big issue, a big issue that I think happens is the lack of emotion regulation. I think we all just lack that. I mean, if you've struggled with addiction or been impacted by addiction in any way, you lack that emotional intelligence, that emotional awareness, and how to regulate your emotions. When for me, it was growing up with a mother who struggled with alcohol, and, I was struggling with my loneliness, and I didn't know what to do with that, and my mom was not capable of providing that emotional support for me. And, my dad was struggling in his own way in relation to my mother's drinking, and my siblings all, like I said, probably had their own different experiences and impacts that they were experiencing. So we're all kind of growing up alone, but together, and nobody's really knowing how to cope with and manage that emotion that we're all experiencing.
Well, 100%. And then particularly when it's a parent, if your children who are kind of coming up that way, that means that the person that you're looking to, at the unconscious level, at least, to provide you with direction and guidance and skills, isn't capable of doing that.
Right.
Because they can't do it for themselves. So, and that's what perpetuates the cycle, I think. I mean, so unless we insert some kind of a spoke in the wheel, and we do find recovery, that is the end of the cycle, potentially. If you find recovery, or if the person in the system does, and then can start to learn those things, the people that were coming up underneath of you are watching you, you're modeling for them good emotional regulation, like you say, and then become more capable of providing that to those people you care about.
Yes.
Having 3 teenagers in my home right now, I can tell you that is something that we talk about, probably not enough, like some, but I mean, I feel that I model with my actions the best that I can by staying calm, by always being in my frontal lobe, right? Like I don't, if I start to get activated, I mean, I've been sober a really long time and kind of doing this work for a while, but occasionally things come up and it's just overwhelming. So being able to turn to those tools right away so that I'm not screaming at them, or, physically putting my hands on, or just acting out of control, or just shaming, just any of that stuff. And I think for me anyway, the practice of that emotional regulation on a very regular daily basis has gotten to me where I am today. And I think has helped them to see, like, oh, okay, not every mom yells and screams at their kids, and also being able to model that, but also to be able to be open enough to listen to them very, very truly, like meaning I can fully listen to what they're saying. I can sit with them. This just happened last week. One of them came to me. She was struggling with some stuff, and it was slow, right? It was very slow. She kind of came around and dropped in a little thing, and I was like, oh, what? I kind of knew something was going on, and but I was able to just kind of ease her into that process by just listening and accepting her in that moment, stopping what I was doing to look at her in the face and just support as she was working through it. But a lot of times, if you're not a good communicator, or you don't know how to even, or you get activated so then you get defensive, or you're too kind of involved in stuff, and you can't take that time to stop and look, you're going to miss it.
Right.
And
I don't think I really knew the tools myself to regulate my emotions really until I started working in the counseling field, and I'm learning them so that I can teach other people. And I'm just like, okay, hey, I'm going to use this for myself, and I'm going to practice this myself. And that's something that where I work, we do a lot of DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. And one of the modules in that is emotion regulation. And the person that I learned DBT from made it very clear to me that if you're going to teach this to other people, I want you to be practicing this all the time, because it's going to help you to teach it. Not only does it help me to teach it, but it helps me in every other area of my life. So it's just invaluable information.
Yeah, exactly. We do have to practice what we're preaching, right? But I really think that your story is a beautiful one, and how full circle it's come around with your relationship with your mom, and the beauty of being an adult child of an alcoholic who gets sober eventually is that you got to see the other side. You saw the whole thing. My kids never have seen me drink. They only know about it. They hear the stories. They've never seen it. So they don't have any frame of reference of any other me than what they know. And sometimes I wonder if that's, I'm grateful, but I also feel like, good Lord, wouldn't it have been good for you to be able to know some bad things and then see how good things are going now? But I know that wouldn't be better, but you get the benefit of having that relationship with your mom now because of recovery, and now for yourself and for your own children, your new baby, and whatever children you have. And it's a real blessing.
Yes. And my mom and I wouldn't have the relationship that we do have now if she hadn't become sober.
It's very difficult to be in a relationship with any kind of addict or alcoholic. It's just, they're just self-centered. There's just self-centered is the root of all of our problems. And that's a true story, and it's kind of an ugly thing to say, and it's an ugly thing to think about ourselves, but it is the truth. And for me, I got sober in AA, like I think your mom did as well. And so that, for me, that's just what I know. It's not the only way to get sober, but it's just what I did. And I was told that self-centeredness isn't what we think about ourselves. It's how often.
Mm.
And that was a real eye opener for me, because when I heard that I was self-centered, I thought, no, I'm not. I don't think anything good about myself. I think I'm like a piece of dirt on the floor. But when I heard that reframe, it really helped open my eyes to say, like, oh, I might think that, but I'm thinking that all day long,
Yeah.
and I'm repeating that story to myself all day long. And so then it became clear what self-centeredness really is. And so when we humble ourselves in recovery and start to do this kind of work to build emotional sobriety,
Mhm.
that's when the real stuff changes. That's when the magic happens.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And it can be a very painful process.
Oh, you know
Right.
it.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm fearful that people let that pain turn them away from what they can achieve in sobriety. Right. And because the natural, easy response is to hide from it and to numb. And, that is going to help you in the moment, but it does not help at all in the long term.
100%. I mean, that is the biggest problem with getting sober, right? From whatever your drug of choice is. I mean, the reason why we were using substances to begin with was to escape our lives, right? To not feel the feeling. So that is our natural way, our natural response. Even as a 19-year sober woman, my natural response is to escape my life, escape discomfort. Now I'm really good at it now, and it doesn't really creep in unless things start to get real escalated, or maybe I'm also hormonal, or there's something else going on, tired. But my instinct is to get out, to go away, to stop that. And so we're always fighting that. We have to fight that with really good resources, but it's painful in the beginning when you're detoxing from a substance. And even if you've been sober for a year and you're still trying to learn how to emotionally regulate, and something uncomfortable happens, and you just don't have the skill. So, and the pain can become so unbearable that it's just hard to stay sober. And that's why we see these chronic relapsers, right? It's kind of like a marriage, like stuff in marriage gets really hard sometimes. I mean, like real hard, and this is where like the rubber meets the road. And a lot of times for couples, they just get out, they're like, well, forget this, I'm out, And when really, I'm not saying every marriage, but like when really, if you hung in there through that really tough stuff, like the stage I'm in, by the way, really tough stuff, then when you get to that other side, it's like going to be okay, but it's so difficult sometimes in the middle. If you're parenting and you're doing all these things, you have all this pressure, our natural way is to just end it. So if we can hang in there, if we can not use and drink, if we can use our tools, call our therapist, get in a group, get on Facebook groups, find people like you and me, and learn some really good tools. They're not that hard either. Like there's some great meditation tools. There's breath work tools. There's like I said, I use EFT and tapping, which I highly recommend. It's something you can do yourself at any time, 15 times a day if you need to. I use a lot of essential oils and blends, and I make the specific things. I have my little roller here. I've been rolling it on all day specifically for something I'm going through, right? So, yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your work. I'm really looking forward to continuing to get to know you as we just go through time together, and sharing space with other clinicians and sober people is just what really lights me up in the world and brings me a lot of joy. So just thank you for being here with us today.
Yes, no, thank you so much for this opportunity. I've been wanting to kind of, get into the podcast world. So this was a great experience for me. And like I said, I'm so grateful that we got connected, through Facebook. And, I think that, I would just love to continue to work with you. And I really respect what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.